Hello guys, it's me again, not Oxley, Insane Gorilla, back here again with another what if Deku was a Spartan. This is a double whammy, and hopefully when you guys get this part 3 would already be out. And just to let you know, that had several pauses in it due to the phone going off twice and a family member being downstairs. So I technically couldn't really do much about that. I apologise. So yeah, and also, well, no, I explained that other part, that certain thing in the other part. As I'm gonna now move on, Uraraka explained to her parents what happened to her and why she is now a Spartan, and she also explained that she fell in love with Izuku Midoriya. And then Izuku explains to his parents what happened to him, saying, "Look, Ma, I'm sorry that I shot Dad, but I never really liked him, and I couldn't let him do to you what he did to me for my sister's sake. But as you most probably, as I found out that you were caught in an accident, the only officer picked me up after after knocking me out. Just picked me up and left with me, and I met Uraraka shortly afterwards. Forgive me for not trying to get in contact with you guys again, but with the way things go, as a Spartan now, I look at things a lot differently. I find it hard now to show my emotions to anybody. Due to our harsh training, I ended up locking away all of my emotions: happiness, love, compassion, mercy. All of the emotions that people usually feel, I locked away. A lot easier than others. Forgive me, but even now I'm finding it even harder to try and hold my emotions in line. My little outburst then was the angry part of me getting out, as he constantly insulted my family, which are the UNSC and you guys. But as Uraraka has said to her family, yes, Oni made us fight simulated targets, then fight each other. But the fighting each other part was to see if we had skills and qualities that could match. Uraraka was always the stealthy one. That's how she managed to get the upper hand on me quite a few times. She gives herself too little credit. She actually won multiple times against me. We constantly battled each other to a draw. 9 times out of 10, it was both of us on the floor, exhausted, and the other times it was either me or her. But we both started to realize that if we had each other, we'd become an unstoppable team, which Oni did not realize until one of our missions together. As Uraraka also said, I took 2 sniper rounds to the chest and a shotgun blast to the back. That is true, the armor did stop the shotgun blast and the sniper rifle rounds, but she failed to mention that there was a third sniper shot that actually penetrated the armor and hit me smack in the chest. It was only the one shot that hit me in the chest, not both. I didn't lie on the floor and accept my fate. I didn't want to lie on the ground and just heal up in front of snipers. I would just be shot again, so I chose to ignore my wounds and move on. It wasn't until I realized later on during the battle that sniper round had an explosive tip, and as it exploded in my armor, a lot of the shrapnel went into me. Sorry, guys. Sorting out the headphones. Anyway, as the shrapnel went into my body, I was in the hospital for a few weeks at most as the doctors and nurses frantically tried to get all the shrapnel out of me. Here, I'll show you the massive scar that it's left as Izuki removes the armor, covering the wound on his left side where that big blue patch is with the UNSC logo on it. That's where the explosive tip hit, and you can remove that anytime because inside that reveals a compartment for a knife as well. So he uses it for something. As he pulls it off and pulls out the knife, saying ignore the knife, as he shows the impact site with a torch that he grabs from a backpack that he brought with him. He said that's where the explosive round hit, and it hit me so hard I didn't even notice that I was bleeding so bad until Uraraka said you're bleeding too much, and she called for an evac. We had the Master Chief with us, but even he said call for an evac. We can't afford to lose a Spartan this early, especially to the insurrection forces. Only fucked up badly. I'm thinking that base we were going to, was just an ordinary base with just a small garrison. It just looked like an outpost, but it turned out to be an forward staging area with just minimal guards. But more and more insurrection forces turned up. We were suddenly finding ourselves surrounded on all sides. Eventually, the Pillar of Autumn did a strafing run above us as a pelican came down to pick us up. The insurrectionists were not expecting the Pillar of Autumn to turn up, along with all the firepower that it brought. Safe to say that forward operating area was completely decimated, but only fucked up really badly. So from there on, we went after smaller targets, like outposts, small encampments, and all that. 2 days ago, we literally went to a local insurrection camp here on Earth. It was bigger than the rest of the encampments that we went to, which led us to believe that they were planning something big. And during the firefight, Uraraka pulled out the plans for the attack on the USJ, which us and Noble Team were a part of. And Noble Team has Noble 6 in it, who was acting like a big brother to us both. As Deku finishes explaining about the USJ attack and about the big bird thing As eventually the class, Aizawa walks in with a sleeping bag and says, right, the class is about to turn up. As Momo Yairozu walks in first, as she sees Deku and Uraraka and a few people, as Deku finished explaining, saying, and that's how we became Spartans. As Momo Yairozu says, you guys were Spartans, so it was real. As Deku looks over and says, yes, but we'll explain when the rest of the class gets here. As he gets up and says, Izumi Midoriya, go to your seat and sit down and wait for the rest of the class. Uraraka, the Urarakas and Miss Midoriya, can you please now leave? And we'll meet up. We'll most probably come round to the houses to meet up and have a good get together. As Inko and the Urarakas hug both of them, saying, we would love it if you both came back home. Even if it was just for a week, or hell, even just a day, we would love it. As tears subtly fall down their faces. Inko and Izumi hugged Izuku with all their might. As eventually Deku lets a stream of tears fall down his face as he subtly cries with them. As Izumi says, it's nice to see that my big brother actually does remember us and never forgot about me. As she just subtly cries alongside her brother. As eventually Uraraka and her family walked over and sort of had a big group hug together. Even though the Urarakas were strangers to the Midoriyas, both of them knew that their kids were working together, so decided that the Urarakas and Midoriyas would become close friends. And that was the start of it. As eventually Bakugo walks in to see this and says, so you finally decided to say sorry to your sister. As Inko said, as he notices that it's Inko and Izumi with a bunch of others hugging him. Well, hugging two people. As he realizes that both of them were, that the two tallest ones are actually Spartans. As he suddenly says, wait, I never believed you both were to be Spartans. I thought it was just a joke. Like just a cover story, but it turns out you both were Spartans. As they turn around saying, yes, we were. We were Spartans the whole time. But we'll explain the reason why we were here in the first place. As the rest of the class starts to walk in, they all see the Spartans. When Kirishima walks in and says, you guys were manly when you were fighting that bird thing. As they said, we know. That's what we Spartans do. As eventually they all sit down and pay attention. As Deku and Uraraka fully explain why they were there and why they were specifically in Class 1A. As everybody then looks at, as they explain, they all look at Momo Yairozu as her face drops, saying, you guys bumped into me on accident because you thought somebody was just trying to mug. Well, you saw those two people forcing themselves on me who didn't realise that you guys were already protecting me. You didn't realise I was there. As they both nod in agreement, saying yes, and we're sorry for lying to you all, but we had our reasons for doing so. Orders were orders, and I followed them. Well, should I say we follow them without question sometimes. There are certain orders that we do sort of question, saying, this isn't right, we shouldn't be doing this. But when we got word that you were a High Council member's daughter, we were obligated to defend you with our own lives if necessary. And just to let you know, this will be most probably the last time you'll see us for some time. Because now that you've noticed that we're Spartans, a lot of villains, and hell, even the insurrection forces, may target UA just to get rid of all the heroes here, including the Spartans. As a knock on the door happens, as Isaiah says, come in, as a bunch of people walk in, as it turns out to be new groups of UNSC Marines, as Dr. Catherine Halsey walks in, saying, you two are now declassified, you both now have revealed yourselves, which you said you were going, which I said you could do anyway. So you were declassified as the Spartans of a new generation, but I'm calling you back to service as effective immediately. The UNSC is now fully going to war with the insurrection. The insurrection have started to hit numerous targets all at once, and ships belonging to the insurrection have appeared above several planets. One of them being Harvest. So you both need to now go to Harvest and go and fight the insurrections. You're both headhunters, so you have full authorization to take out as many high value targets as you can. From fuel depots to capital ships if you can get aboard. Hell, if you can even find the one leading the attacks on the planet, on that planet, it'll severely cripple the insurrection forces. So try your best to not screw up. This is going to be the biggest engagement the UNSC has ever been in, as the whole class actually is in fear that these two that they've started to get to know are now going off to war. As Kirishima says, but what if the heroes get attacked again, and it turns out to be that the insurrection forces are with the villains trying to kill all the heroes? As Dr. Halsey says, it's alright, you're going to have a group of Spartans with you guys at all times now. As she says, the Reds and Blues. They call themselves the Reds versus Blues due to them having different colours and always seem to be either having a laugh and a joke with each other, but always keeping scores. The leader of the Reds, he just goes by the name of Sarge. As Sarge actually walks in and says, hello all. And the leader of the Blues, Church, as he walks in as well, saying yo. These two are in charge of the Reds and Blues, but there are two others who work alongside them all the time. They go by the code names Carolina and Washington. Hell, there's even the meta as well. As they all three of them walk in, Washington saying hello to you all, and salutes to Izuku, Midoriya, and Uraraka. As the so does Carolina, Meta, Church, and Sarge. They all salute, saying, "It's an honor to see you guys. You two are headhunters, so you better get going for your mission. We will keep this class safe for you until you return, but if the situation requires it, we will have to leave them as well." As Dr. Halsey says through that, we don't know how many Spartans it will take just to take these insurrection forces off of the worlds that they have invaded. So please, Titan, Wraith, head to a gunship that is parked outside. I'll call for another one, and that will take you straight to the Pillar of Autumn as she herself joins her fleet to go to harvest. Don't take any prisoners if you can try. If you can try and not take any prisoners, bar from the one either A leading it or the one who was actually in charge of the whole of any operations that they have going on Harvest. The civilians themselves are trying to evacuate the planet, and the insurrectionists are just taking off their uniforms and blending into the local population as well. So certain times you might find that the insurrectionists have gotten behind your lines, so always remain vigilant. There are scanners within your helmets because they are upgraded now, were recently upgraded, so there are facial recognition plates within your helmets. So they'll just scan all the civilians that you come across, and it will pop up with a red flag and put them on the watch list, as local forces will then subtly follow them, and if they look like they're doing anything shady to do with the insurrection, they will immediately arrest them. Or, if they have to, kill them. As Izuku Midoriya and Achaka Uraraka salute, saying, "Yes, ma'am. We will do what we must to make sure that the insurrection does not gain a foothold." As they leave and walk out the door, Izumi shouts, "Izuku Uraraka, please be careful and come back in one piece." As Carolina says, "They're smart. They're not stupid. They have been training for this, young lady. So please sit back down in your seat." One of them, you called Izuku Midoriya one. I take it that you're his sister. If you are Midoriya, and she says yes, I'm his sister, and I just want my brother back in my life. I thought I could have him for a few hours at least, but now they're just going off to war and most probably will never come back. Izuku Midoriya quickly pops back in and pulls out something for his sister, saying, "Here, whenever I'm not hunting, I'll always contact you to see how you're doing. That's a promise from a big brother to a little sister." And she then gets up on a table and hugs him. As everybody sort of says "ah" and says "please be safe." you're part of you became part of this group here in UA. I think everybody started to get attached to you too. So come back safe and sound. Zuko says no promises, but I'll damn well make sure that I come back, even with all the rucka. But don't mourn for us if we don't come back. Promise me, or promise us both, if we don't come back, you'll be the best heroes you can ever be, and you'll do your best to make sure the worlds are safe. As a lot of people, as all the class agrees, and says we will do our best. As Zuko then leaves again, catching up to Uraraka, as she says, "Come on, we can't linger anymore." As they run off to the pelicans, as they take him up to the Pillar of Autumn, who then slip space jumps to Harvest. When they reach Harvest, the insurrection is in full swing. They took out, they started taking over major civilian population centers, as the UNSC soldiers still try to hold them back. Eventually, the Spartans do turn up, as the insurrection forces are still unaware that the Spartans even exist. As the Spartans land and start destroying the flank of an insurrection force, a large group of insurrection forces turn to face them. As a few missile batteries get fired as they hit the back and center lines of the insurrection forces. As the insurrectionists then get completely confused on where the true fire is coming from, as they look up to see a big UNSC fleet that starts to outgun their own. As pelicans filled with marines start landing all over the planet to give reinforcements. Eventually, the UNSC managed to push the insurrection forces all the way back to the main landing zones. This is where the insurrection forces turn around and start firing at something from the back, as the Spartans get confused as they move up. And by the way, this has taken years to push them back. As the Spartans finally pushed them all the way back to the main landing sites, as the insurrection forces start firing at something from behind them. As reports start coming in of unknown hostiles, as the Spartans arrest the general in charge of the local insurrection forces, as he starts screaming, "They're coming! We have to fight them now, or otherwise this whole planet will be overrun within a matter of days." As the Spartans start shooting at whatever's coming, as they see plasma bolts come straight streaming past them, and unholy noises like grunts and idle chatter of an unknown alien language. Eventually, the Spartans get told to hold the line with anybody who's willing to fight alongside them, which turns out all the insurrection forces are actually willing to now fight alongside the Spartans and the UNSC to try and hold off this new aggressor. For hours, the UNSC and the insurrection held off their unknown alien attackers as unidentified ships start pouring into the atmosphere, eventually starting to do something to the ground with a beam of light. As Deku sends a transmission to the Pillar of Autumn, telling him to try and land as many pelicans as they can to evacuate every civilian on the planet as they hold off their new aggressors. As the UNSC spirit, as the spirit of fire then comes into context, saying to all ground forces, all civilian evacuation is underway. Unknown alien force has launched a surprise attack. As this news gets travelled galaxy wide through all of the UNSC's all the UNSC channels, including the news, who spread the word that Harvest was attacked by the insurrection. Now it's being attacked by an unknown alien force. As the news covers it, news covers it all over the world of Earth and Reach and all the others planets that the UNSC own. They get the message that the UNSC is now under attack from a different army. This one seems to be heavily religious. As eventually, after Harvest falls, reports come back about the massive amounts of casualties. Izumi constantly has her brother's communication device that he gave her on her at all times as she dials the number of his in as she gets connection lost. Eventually she gets so concerned that she gets in contact with Oni somehow and demands to know where her brother is. As Oni covers up the existence of her brother, saying Spartans never die, they're only missing in action. As Azumi says, I don't care if he's a Spartan, he's a brother to me first, a Spartan second. And he's the only side of my family. He's one part of my family that I cannot afford to lose. Because I've already lost my father, even though my father was a dirtbag all the time. He is still my brother. So please, try and contact him. As the only officer says, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we cannot. As she starts getting frustrated and upset, saying, come on, you assholes. I'm trying to find my brother. He goes by the code name of Titan, and he's a goddamn headhunter. As the only officer still says, I'm sorry, ma'am, but even headhunters are extremely classified. Eventually, the ruckus gets the attention of Dr. Catherine Halsey, who turns up to find out what the hell was going on. And she realizes that it's Izuku Midoriya's sister, Izumi Midoriya. And she says, you're Izumi Midoriya, right? And she turns around and says, yes, pardon my language, where the fuck's my brother? Last I checked, he went to Harvest, and now the news is screaming about an unknown alien force that has attacked Harvest. And my brother's on Harvest, and I cannot afford to lose him. I only just found him. Once again. And I cannot afford to lose a family member, not now. My mother's heart will be shattered forever. After losing her first child to a supposed to you guys, she can't afford to lose him now in a war. As Doctor as Halsey says, I'm sorry, but all contact with the fleet that was sent to Harvest was lost. All ground forces we heard were being evacuated and the Spartans were holding their ground. Numerous Spartan teams were on planet at the time, and we even feared that all the Spartans are dead. But to keep up the mirage of Spartans never died, they're only missing. It takes us as much effort as we can to avoid a global panic. Were millions of people on Harvest, and there were millions of other people around different planets that we sent Spartans to give reinforcements to the local forces there. All these planets were attacked simultaneously by the insurrection, and again attacked simultaneously from this new alien force that has the capacity to make ships far faster than we can. Even the orbital defenses apparently fired on these new invaders, and the Mac rounds that hit them just looked like they didn't do a goddamn thing. Earth is now going to be heavily fortified, along with Reach and the other planets. We don't know how long it's going to take us to count the casualties, as we've been looking through all the ship's logs, every single ship's log when they first got there, because they always send status reports back to us. And it stopped when they got reports of unknown forces attacking the Spartans and insurrection and the rest of the UNSC forces simultaneously. We lost all contact over all planets afterwards. I'm sorry, but we can't rule out the possibility that they're all dead. Spartans never die, they go missing, but it doesn't mean that they're not alive anymore. Those two were the best of the best. Hell, Chief made them the best of the best. And if he knows that the two children he raised to be like his own were like his own, I know him very well, and he will go ballistic. As eventually they get a message from the unknown aggressor saying, we we are the Covenant and we fight for our gods. Humans are filth, and we will exterminate you all. This was just but a taste of our power. Now prepare for a full-out war with the Covenant. As this transmission was targeted at all human stations, facilities, stations, and planet-wide through the entire UNSC, global panic started, as even Earth couldn't process this news that they have a new enemy called the Covenant, and they are a religious faction that believes that their gods want them to destroy all of humanity. Eventually, the UNSC got its act together, but were always fighting a defensive war against the Covenant. As they finally identified each individual faction within the Covenant, the Grunts, the Senhili, the Brutes, Jackals, the engineering units of the Covenant that were slaves to them. Hell, they even had drones, flying bugs that constantly harassed forces. And their ships were called Phantoms and Banshees. During one of the attacks that the Covenant made, they deployed a giant four-legged walker that was later known as a scarab. As dozens of worlds started getting attacked by the Covenant, the UNSC was pushed to its breaking point, eventually drawing the Covenant into a stalemate, with individual captains making daring moves against the other to probe its defences. Eventually only made 300 Spartans. 300 more Spartans, with dozens, if not hundreds, of dozens not surviving the turn from ordinary person to super soldier. Eventually only launched a massive counterattack on a neighbouring system that turned out to house the same area of space, inhabit the same area of space where Harvest was. Pushing through the Covenant forces and eventually landing back on Harvest. As dozens of Spartans go on search and destroy missions, they find out that the Covenant haven't completely destroyed Harvest. There were still tens of trillions of individuals fighting the Covenant still, using their own weapons against them. Eventually finding 2 helmets of Spartans that go by the name of Wraith and Titan. But it doesn't seem like their bodies were there. Eventually the Spartans continue fighting the Covenant, then finally finding a body part of Titan, of Spartan Titan, his right arm. As they follow a blood trail as it goes into a building, eventually coming across Titan and Wraith as they shout UNSC Spartans report as Uraraka and Izuku Midoriya do not respond. As the Spartans that found them turn on their lights as they notice that both of them are severely injured. Uraraka's missing her left arm, as Izuku's missing his right. But not only that, he is missing his entire left leg. There's only a stump where his joint is that attaches to his crutch. And they're still bleeding. As eventually they put Medagel and Virofoam on them, stabilizing them and evacuating them. But they lost too much blood, and the Spartans thought that they may not survive the trip back to Reach, or hell, even Earth. And during this time, the sports festival has happened, with Izumi taking second place next to Bakugo, who was very concerned for Izumi's well-being as she became more and more distant from other people. Eventually, he went to Oni and said, "How do I become an ODSD? Do I have to join the military or something to become an ODSD? Because I want to go out there and try and find my friend. Because his sister is breaking herself apart." Eventually, a ODSD turns up to investigate the Ruckers, as he says, "I'll take the kid on. If he wants to become an ODSD so badly, I'll take him on. I'll put him through the hellish training we go through. If he wants to find his friend so badly. For his own sister's sake, I will take him on." As Bakugo gets on his hands and knees and says, "Please train me. I want to become stronger like my friend. I want to go to war, to go and find, not to fight, but to go and find him and bring him home." As a few more months pass of Bakugo's extreme training by the UNSC soldiers, as they physically and mentally break him. Eventually, it got so bad he almost got put into an insane asylum, but he manages to pull through. But he still goes to school, and for his efforts, he shows all the bruises he's got. As Azumi became more and more determined to become a hero, but to join the military as well. And she just doesn't give a damn about anything anymore. She just wants to find her brother and bring him back. Eventually, the new list of injured and dead appear, as Azumi just knows that her brother isn't among them, because she has the feeling that he's still alive. But as the list scrolls up even further, there becomes a critically injured segment where two Spartans' names appear, as Inka Midoriya shouts for Izumi, saying, "Come down here quickly. Your brother's been found," as she runs down to see the critically injured message. As the Spartans known as Titan and Wraith have been located and are in critical condition. The planet Harvest was almost completely glassed by our new enemy, and these two were found leading a massive resistance movement against the Covenant. They are currently in transit to a maximum medical facility on Reach. As Izumi says, "I'm going, Mum," as she says, "No, you're not, just yet, just listen." As the news carries on, saying that the casualties are extensive. We're lucky that we have survived the first year of the war with the Covenant. The war may reach Earth soon or sometime. So everybody please be ready just in case. This is a general alert from ONI and from the UNSC in general. The High Council has told is now initiated everybody to be careful around space of Earth and of the outlying colonies of the UNSC. Eventually, they find out that they're going to a training camp within the woods, but they're going to have a training camp of a difference. There's going to be military personnel there as well. As they say, as Aizawa says that the Spartans that were with us to protect this class have been deployed for war as well. So the military personnel are going to come with us are UNSC Marines and ODSDs that have come back from deployment due to injuries, and they've been told to train you lot in using weapons, because a lot of people don't know. Well, we all know that your quirks are good, but these enemies could snipe you from 50 miles away and you wouldn't know about it. So they're going to train you to be physically fit and more prepared for a gun battle. Bakugo is already physically fit because he's already fought against ODSDs, because Bakugo has told him that he applied for the military and said, how does he become a UNSC ODSD as an ODST trained him. Sorry if I'm rambling. As eventually they all go to the Wild Pussycats. As the UNSC Marines and ODSDs walk out of a different transport, or out of a Pelican. As the Wild Pussycats said, right, this is going to be a lot more dangerous and we don't like it, but this is going to have to be what it is. As they do the same thing in canon, but this time the obstacles in their way are a lot more dangerous, and their intent is to seriously hurt them. Eventually, after 5 hours, they get to where the Wild Pussycats base of operation is. They see the UNSC Marines doing laps, going over obstacles, doing target practice on the size of their new enemies. As Bakugo walks up to his instructor, as he gives him a rifle and says, right, shoot, aim and shoot. Don't think about it, just start shooting by aiming. As Bakugo does, and he hits a perfect bullseye. As Izumi's turn next, and she does exactly the same thing, but misses. As she gets passed along to another instructor, saying, train her on keeping her focus and her aim. As her instructor says, alright, tell me what you want to try and do. As she says, I want to become a soldier to find my brother. As she says, a worthy goal. Now put your eyes up to the scope and squeeze the trigger. As Azumi just puts her eye up to the scope and just doesn't squeeze, just pulls the trigger back. As the kickback nearly knocks her arm backwards. As the bullet goes straight past again. As the instructor says, look, you're not going to hit anything with anger. Squeeze the trigger. Don't focus on anything else, just squeeze the trigger. And she eventually does. Squeezing until eventually the satisfying smack of a round hitting its target square in the arm. As they continue doing this for the rest of the time that they're there. The same thing happens in canon where the League of Villains turn up, but with the military being there as well, which actually took the League of Villains by surprise. As Izumi actually deals with Darby due to him having flames and saying you're all pretty weak compared to those so-called Spartans. I'm surprised that you kids can even hold a rifle correctly, as he ends up getting backhanded by Izumi with her then breathing fire on him. As he says, fire doesn't affect me, girl, as he punches her away. Eventually, 2 drop pods hit the ground as Darby feels a punch straight into his jawline as he gets sent flying. As Izumi looks up to see a metal arm and then looks to her left to see a metal leg but with blue and green wrapped around it. As a voice says, you keep your hands off of my sister. As her face lights up as she says, took you long enough to get back here. As Deku says, I'm sorry. Injuries got in the way of me coming back here along with this new enemy. So I don't see why we're all fighting each other again. as he falls to the ground in pain, saying, "The doc said don't push my body too far." When I heard that you guys were under attack, got found out to be attacked by the League of Villains again, me and Uraraka just lost it. We got on transport and said, "Fly us directly above directly above where the Wild Pussycat's base is, and launch us down in drop pods." As Azumi says, Uraraka's here as well. As he says yes, she's at the moment going to find any other students that may be lost out there. At the minute, little sis. So, how did this all happen? As she explains, Deku getting thoroughly pissed, saying these people do not have the balls to even face people properly. They have to sneak attack everybody. And attack everybody when we're all at war with a alien faction that wants us all dead. These people have no self of honor or self righteousness to defend their race in the last, possibly even the last days of humanity. Yes, we've been fighting back the Covenant, but it doesn't mean that the villains can start causing shit back home. As eventually the villains retreat again, and Bakugo is not captured due to his training. As all the students are rounded up again from the by the UNSC soldiers, including the Spartans, that everybody's actually relieved they could see once again. But noticing that Deku actually has a metal arm and a metal leg, everybody sort of says, "What the hell happened to you?" As Deku says during one of our engagements with the Covenant, "I lost my arm." Uraraka then lost hers. Shortly afterwards, as she was running with me, she then lost hers, then I lost my leg. We were bleeding out very quickly, but we still managed to take out as many Covenant as we could until the UNSC found us. Fellow Spartans from different departments finally found us. But when we first opened our eyes to see who found us, it turned out to be the Reds and Blue team, Reds and Blue teams that found us. We were so relieved to find that the Goonie squads, the two Goon squads managed to find us. Church and Sarge immediately tried applying first aid. Caboose made us both synthetic arms to stem the bleeding to the best of his abilities. He even said they're crude, but they should stem the bleeding until we get back to base. As Griff, Tucker, and Simmons all tried to hold us still, as Caboose applied his new creations to our bodies, not fusing them together, but making sure that the bleeding was stemmed. He said I'm a combat engineer, not a combat medic, but I should try. And this should help stem the bleeding for a while, as both of us get taken to a pelican and taken away. We both ended up on a station above Earth, where we spent a few months, well, literally quite some time within comas, as the UNSC did their work. Carolina and everybody told us what was going on, so we came down here. Anyway, guys, this is where I'm leaving it off. Hope you like, comment, and subscribe. And the Covenant have finally turned up. Hey.